What came as kind of a surprise in the latest episode of The Mandalorian was the reference to Count Dooku being a visionary, a hero. There was a lot of cameos in episode 6, most notably, of course, Jack Black, Lizzo, and last but not least, the great Christopher Lloyd, who I kind of felt sad for watching him. He is just at the tail end of his acting career. He's pretty old at this point, but regardless, he revealed himself not to be a former Imperial or former Republic admirer. He is a former separatist. A separatist who still holds the ideals of Count Dooku, champions his name. What's even more interesting is that if Bo-Katan hadn't stunned him right at that point, he was just about to mention the Jedi Enforcer Anakin Skywalker, the one who took down the visionary Count Dooku and therefore kind of ended the separatists. From that point on, Obi-Wan went on to kill off Grievous too, so that pretty much spelled the end of the separatist movement. So today we're going to talk about not only Dooku and this newfound persona that has precipitated ever since Tales of the Jedi and now The Mandalorian, but have we seen Christopher Lloyd's character in the Clone Wars series too, since it seems like he has met with Count Dooku before. Now the question is, why are people still revering Count Dooku after so many decades? You see, the separatists began as a political movement. The sad part is that the Sith plan to use them to incite war across the galaxy, mainly Palpatine. There is a lot of debate up until this day that if Count Dooku had stuck to his ideals and hadn't accepted the Sith, that even the Jedi and the Republic would not be able to turn people against him so easily. The Jedi to begin with. The Clone Wars was the ultimate Jedi trap, as we know, engineered by Palpatine to draw the Jedi away from Coruscant, kill them slowly throughout the galaxy, diminish their numbers, and when Order 66 comes, they are completely vulnerable. Jedi were ill-suited for war, and war is naturally aggressive. So if Dooku and the rest of the galaxy thought that the Jedi had lost their way before the Clone Wars, you can imagine what an awful image the Clone Wars showed of the Jedi Order in total. They were essentially painted as hypocrites. This is the main reason why Commissioner Helget hates Anakin Skywalker, calls him a Jedi Enforcer. That name alone is an oxymoron. How can a Jedi be an enforcer? The authorities enforce the law. However, this didn't seem like a legal term. What Commissioner Helget was trying to say is, on the contrary, that the Jedi were the aggressors at this point. This is why he was trying to call Anakin a Jedi Enforcer. And if Anakin was the Jedi Enforcer, then by that point, everybody else was. Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, and the rest of the Jedi Council. You could essentially feel the hate flow through Commissioner Helget. And this is why it's not surprising that Star Wars is slowly trying to reveal that Dooku is still revered by former separatists even after the Clone Wars ended decades ago. Because they saw Dooku in an entire different light. They didn't care that he fell to the dark side. Perhaps most of them didn't even know his religious beliefs. What most of them knew was that this was a former Jedi who believed that the Republic was becoming increasingly authoritarian, corrupted from within. From Commissioner Helget's perspective, the end of the Clone Wars seemed to confirm everything Dooku was teaching all along. This is why he calls him a visionary. He was proven to be right about the Jedi who initially led the Republic army before turning their swords towards Chancellor Palpatine, attempting to assassinate him, therefore Order 66. At least this is what the galaxy was fed with their propaganda. It doesn't really matter that the Jedi had no fault. They actually saw Chancellor Palpatine by who he really was, a secret Sith Lord who was trying to overtake the galaxy and rule as a single dictator. The reality is that unfortunately all the Jedi fell prey to Palpatine and his newly found empire. They were hunted down, killed, but as for the citizens of the now empire, former republic, whether you were a separatist or whatever, you got the news that the Jedi killed as many people as they could and then in the end tried to take control over Chancellor Palpatine. Fortunately for the galaxy, they were stopped. This is the news that you were fed, and it was motivated by fear of the Jedi. What that episode actually showed is that this was the true reality of the citizens across the galaxy. It was very rare for people to actually know the truth. Only those who followed the Jedi teachings closely. Others who were simply living their lives, they hated the Jedi. This is Commissioner Helget, who hated them even more because of what Dooku taught him, because of what the separatist movement represented. They saw the Jedi as evil. Ironically, remember what Anakin says to Obi-Wan at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He tells him that, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. And this was kind of hastily done, perhaps, in the prequels. We know that the dialogue and the storyline sometimes jumps ahead and doesn't really make sense. How did Anakin come to this conclusion so fast? But when we have time to dissect everything, you can see that in this series with Commissioner Helget, he does have a point. When, from his perspective, he sees Dooku as a visionary and Anakin as an enforcer, essentially the Jedi as bad, he is not wrong. You cannot really make the case on the contrary, because you don't know what Helget went through during the Republic's reign. His homeworld might have been suffering, and here comes a separatist movement led by Dooku who will save him, and perhaps even saved him. So what's even more interesting during this episode is that Commissioner Helget kind of speaks about Dooku like he has actually met him. Unfortunately, we do not have this character in the Clone Wars animated series. He is an original character created for the Mandalorian series. It might be that he is just speaking out of experience, out of what he lived through during the separatist movement, but I don't know, something tells me that Dooku might have cross paths with Commissioner Helget at some point during his life. I don't know, a very interesting notion to get a perspective from the other side. And I kind of feel like Dave Filoni is not going to stop anytime soon. I mean, it started with Tales of the Jedi. Perhaps it started way sooner with some novels, but especially with Tales of the Jedi, we got a feel of a different Dooku, a Dooku from the past who started doubting his order as a kind of a young man towards an older, more mature Dooku where you can see he has completely abandoned his Jedi Order sentiments. And the biggest revelation is that by the time we see the Phantom Menace, at that time Dooku has already turned and is already working with Sidious behind the scenes. Creates another conflict if you think about it, because Maul is Sidious's apprentice at that time. He still hasn't been killed, so it's a bit of a conflict there. Tales of the Jedi and Commissioner Helget gave us a lot more to think about. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, leave a thumbs up down below, subscribe for dailies. Now you have an awesome day, Star Wars fans. I'll see you in the next video, and may the Force be with you. Until then.